Hey guys, it's Kevin again, and this is going to be a delayed video that I've been trying to get out for a little bit now. So, if you guys know, recently the Sundance Film Festival of 2021 has taken place. This is a film festival that I myself have wanted to go to for a very long time now, for a couple of reasons. I mean, one, I think the opportunity to go to any film festival is really cool. You get to see a lot of films before anyone else does. You don't know what half of these films are going to be, but you're hoping that they will end up good, and a lot of the time they do, and they end up being some of the best films of the year that a lot of the time, you know, eventually get a lot of Oscar buzz towards the end of the year and things like that. So that definitely had me very excited. But then also the fact that, you know, this is a film festival that is, again, highly regarded as one of the most important of the entire year. I would say that this and TIFF are the most important ones. So just the prospect of that alone had me very excited. And of course, because of, you know, pandemic and things like that, it was offered to everyone. You didn't have to go in person, you could just watch online, and that's exactly what I ended up doing. And I ended up seeing quite a few more films than I expected to. I initially just expected to see like one or two. I ended up seeing 6. Now, 5 of them I will be discussing in this video. The last one that I saw I will be talking about in a separate video because it is a fairly recent movie that came out that I do want to do an individual review for, but the majority of these are not films that have been released yet. They don't have release dates, but they are films that I do want to give my thoughts on. I have some stuff to say about all of these. Some of them I have a lot to say, some of them not. Either way, we're just going to dive into it right now. And this is going to be almost in the style of a catch-up review, I guess, but it's not really that because, again, these aren't films that are, aside from one of them, widely accessible at the moment. It's not like you can go out and watch them, but I just figured, you know what? I did this film festival. I might as well not take that. I don't want to take that for granted. I want to take full advantage of that and just let you guys know if these are any good, if you guys should check them out, and just really just get the word out there. I feel like any exposure for, you know, films that are at film festivals, whether good or bad, is good to do because, you know, some of them are not as well known, some of them are a lot smaller, they might not get the audience that they really do deserve, and that's kind of what I'm trying to do here. Not just give you my thoughts, but also just let you guys be in the know of what some of these are, and hopefully, you know, give you guys a good understanding of, you know, what these films are, why you should check them out, all that kind of stuff. Either way, I'm rambling. Let's just get into it. The first one we're going to be talking about is Passing, and this was easily one of the most anticipated films of the entire fest, and it was also a film that I didn't think I was going to be able to see, but Sundance was doing this really cool thing where every single night around midnight, they would release tickets again. Tickets that were seemingly sold out suddenly weren't. I was able to see this film, and I'm very happy I was, because this is a much different film than you're probably expecting. Passing is a film about a lot of things. Yes, obviously the major one is race, considering that the main plot of this movie involves these two friends that they once were very close. They once had a bond of sorts, but they've sort of drifted apart, and they've gone in very different directions since then. And one of them is, you know, living happily as a Black American, but the other one is passing as white, mainly because she has to in that way, and you really do kind of get to see that here. But it's also a film, I think, about regret, and also just the idea of taking on a different life, and the things that we have to conceal that we wish we didn't have to. And I think this applies for almost all of these characters here. I mean, you look at our main character in Tessa Thompson, who, you know, she says she's generally happy with who she is. She's generally happy, with living the way she does. She doesn't really want to change things all that much, the character of Rainey, but she's also very reserved and very quiet, and you can tell this is something that she has been very content with. But meeting back up with someone like Claire, Ruth Nega's character, who is so much more free-spirited and vivacious and very outgoing in that way, you can see that this kind of takes a toll on her because she's not used to this kind of energy. energy. She wishes she was this way, but she's not. And then you look at Ruth Nega's character, who, again, she's kind of been living a lie for all this time. She has had to tell her extremely racist husband, who flat out says he hates black people. And you can see that this is something that, while she's hid it for a while, she really hasn't gotten a chance to just be herself. And she really likes taking that opportunity. And because of that, she, again, lives life stress-free in that way. She feels very relaxed, and she seems to bring immense joy to everyone around her, whether it's Rainie's kids, who she develops a close bond with, or Rainie's husband, who is someone that, you know, he is kind of uptight. He is someone that really does care a lot about Rainie, but there are a lot of areas where they very much do differ. There are certain things that Rainie doesn't want her kids to be aware of, but yet Andre Holland's character does, and you can kind of see where they differ, and it kind of takes a toll on her marriage. And I thought the contrast between these two characters was really interesting. And also, the performances from Tessa Thompson and Ruth Negga are top tier here. I think this might just be the best work from Tessa Thompson I've seen besides last season of Westworld. I think she is amazing in this role. She plays, like I said, it's a very reserved performance, but Thompson just such a great job of really just eliciting every emotion out of this character. You understand everything that Rainie is going through. You understand how, even though Claire is someone that is someone she enjoys seeing, she also is disturbed by her because she is starting to make her question things about her life that she didn't really do before. And for Ruth Negga, who also is phenomenal in this film, and I do think gives probably the best performance I've seen from her, she does a great job at playing this woman that, and on the surface, is very carefree, very outgoing, but really under all of that is a very broken and regretful woman who really wishes she had made some different choices within her life. You know, she's dyed her hair blonde. She is someone that constantly has to hear very racist rhetoric from her husband on a near daily basis, has clearly just married him for money, wants really nothing to do with him. And so when she comes into, you know, Claire's side of when she comes into Rainie's family and is, you know, taking care of the kids because she develops a really good bond with them, and then starts to develop a bond with Rainie's husband, Brian. You can really see how this makes her feel a bit liberated. This makes her feel a bit more at ease because for the first time, she doesn't really have anything to hide. She can be who she wants to be, and this is something that she just hasn't been able to do in a while, and I think Negga just does such a great job with that. All the performances here are really amazing. Even smaller roles, like, say, Alexander Skarsgård is phenomenal in this movie. He plays such a racist and disgusting character, but you believe every single second of what he's saying, and I think they do a really good job with that. Andre Holland is great here too. He could have played a very, like, asshole type character, but you do understand where this character is coming from. There are just some clear areas where him and his wife do not agree on. He really does care for her, but there are just a lot of things that they don't really see eye to eye on, and I thought he did a really good job with that. Even Bill Camp, who plays maybe the most self-aware character in the entire movie, you know, he's someone that is always dissecting a lot of what's going on. He understands what these characters are going through, and Thompson's character really starts to grow a fond attachment to him. I really loved him in here a lot. I think all the performances here are really amazing, and the directing here by Rebecca Hall, it's been scrutinized a lot in this movie, and what I think people don't understand that this is not just some white woman tackling you know, this story from like the 1920s. No, Rebecca Hall is from a family of mixed race parents, so she has definitely thought about this before. She does have some exposure to this type of story, and I think she did a really good job at directing this film. You can tell there was a lot of passion she put into this. This is definitely something that she's wanted to do for a while, and the way she directs the film, it feels very subdued. You know, normally when you have a film that takes place in the 1920s, it's very loud and vivacious, but this film has almost a melancholy type feeling, and I think she does a really good job with that in terms of the directing here, and I definitely would be down to see more films from her in the future, because I really enjoyed her directing here a lot. I think the writing in this film is also really well done. She really does a great job in, again, diving into these characters that are having these very hard conversations, but they're conversations that need to be had. They're things that we need to think about, and definitely I think she just does a really great job of diving headfirst into all of that. The black and white cinematography really works well here too. Definitely is one of the things that sticks out about this movie. There are some scenes here that are very trippy, to say the least, and I think for some people it might take them out of the movie, but I really appreciate its ambition. I like the directions that the film ended up going with it. I thought there were some really interesting undertones that the film had, for sure. And there's also this really jazzy piano type score that really does work here as well, that I really liked a lot. And in general, I just think there's a lot of things that really do work about this movie. It's very well paced. It's only 90 minutes. I do think it could have been a little bit longer. I will say that. I would have liked that. And I also would have liked to see a little bit more of Claire's side of things. You know, we do get to see it, but a lot of it is from Rainie's perspective, and I would have liked to see a few more scenes of just what Claire goes through on a daily basis, just so that contrast is that much more effective. Because again, the relation between these two women, that's really what makes this film so great. It's a relationship that, while it's very compelling and one that you can tell really fulfills both of them, it also feels kind of tiring. It also really brings out the worst in them at points, and I think the film just does a really great job with that. Overall, I was very impressed by this one. I thought it was thoroughly engaging. It went in a direction I really was not expecting at the end. I think the ending of this movie is so shocking, and definitely is one that I think a lot of people are going to be talking about. This is overall just a really well done film. It's got two amazing performances from its leads that I really hope are talked about at the end of this year, for sure. I think definitely Oscar season, definitely this is a film that should be talked about. Overall, definitely already one of my favorite films of the entire year. A lot of things to talk about when it comes to passing it. It dissects some really hard questions that I think some films have dived into, but never to the degree that this one really does, and I think that's something it does really well. Overall, I really enjoyed this film a lot, and I'm definitely going to give Passing an A-. So the next one we're going to be talking about is Crypto Zoo, and this film is really weird, to say the least. There are a lot of things that I really do appreciate about it, and it was a film that a lot of people, when it came out, were raving about and all this stuff, and that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to check it out, but I gotta be honest, I think there's a lot of things that work very well here. The animation is really weird and out there. I really haven't seen anything quite like this before in terms of the animation. It has this almost Adult Swim type feel to it, the way the animation looks. It's definitely unlike anything I've seen before, and I really did appreciate its ambition in that way. It goes in some really weird directions. It's also very graphic in terms of the way that it's done, and I think the look of these creatures, especially the idea of all of these mystical creatures being kept in this zoo, is a really compelling premise. And the film itself, it's very psychedelic. It has this very sort of meditative score as well that really sticks out, and I just think overall, from an animation standpoint, this film is so gorgeous to look at. It's very subversive and jarring and things like that. However, while we have a very subversive film in terms of animation, the film itself, unfortunately, can't seem to escape the trappings of just a really generic story. I mean, there really isn't that much to this in terms of the story here. It's the same thing we've seen in a lot of films where, you have this woman who is a zookeeper, and she's trying to do what she can to, capture this creature for good, but then you also have this other character that he wants to, militarize all of the creatures, and we've just seen this story done a lot of times before, and I just found it to be very familiar in that way, and I don't think the film did a very good job of sticking out. Again, I think animation-wise, it absolutely does. Score-wise, it absolutely does. Even the directing here, I think, by Dash Shaw is really good. He has a lot of really interesting ideas, and I really did appreciate that from a directorial standpoint. But aside from that, I just couldn't really get invested in the story. The characters themselves also are very flat here. Aside from maybe the main lead, who Lake Bell does a really good job at playing this character of Lauren. You know, you understand who she is, that she's been through a lot, and you understand why she cares so much about opening this crypto zoo. But aside from her, I just couldn't get invested in anyone here. There's this couple that we focus on in the beginning of the movie, and the film tries to circle back to it, and it just feels forced. It felt very forced to me, and I didn't think they did a very good job of making that connection as good as they really should have. It just felt like something where, you know, they tried to tie it in, and it just didn't really work in the way they wanted to. And again, this story, it's just not very interesting. It's one that you've seen a lot before, and it just didn't really make that much of an impact on me, unfortunately. It's a film where, as I was watching it, I began to forget about it. I began to not really care all that much about it, and it kind of lost me in the end, unfortunately. So while I do think there's a lot of things that I do admire about this film, I just think overall it's really generic and very, again, just not very, overly familiar in terms of the way it goes about a lot of its story beats. I think there's some good ideas in there, but for me, I just wasn't really a big fan of it. I think some people are really going to appreciate this film. I think there's a lot of really interesting animation. I appreciate Dash Shaw's ambition, but aside from some really stunning visuals, there really just wasn't a lot to like about Crypto Zoo, so I gotta give this one a C. So the next one we're talking about is one that actually is in theaters now, and that's Land. And this one I was very excited for. I thought that this was a film that looked very intriguing, but also looked very emotionally, it looked very cathartic. It seemed like one of those films that is putting this character in this situation where she feels like all is lost. She's gone through this tragedy, and you can tell that it's had a very specific toll on her, and that's something that a lot of us can relate to. We go through some hardships in life, and they really put us through the ringer, and that's exactly what this character Edie is going through, and Robin Wright is phenomenal in this role. I mean, this is easily, I think, one of her best performances so far. You feel every single emotion that this character is going through. You really understand a lot of what has happened to her here, and I think the film definitely does do a really good job with that. And what this film has to say about this woman that in the beginning of this movie feels so hopeless, feels like there really is just no path here. Like, this is the thing that is going to drive her to the end. She doesn't really feel like there's any reason to live, become whole again, and starts to feel more hope within her life. I really love a lot. I think that's a really good message. I think it's one that people, especially now, really need to hear. We're going through some really rough times, with the pandemic, and with, some people in Texas with, like, the snow, and, even, like, politics-wise, there's been a lot of things recently that are just really unfortunate and tragic, but this film really tells you that you can't ever let that get the best of you. You have to think about the things that keep you hopeful. You have to think about those things that keep you sane in life, and I think the movie does a really good job with getting into that, and just the look of how you move on, and not forgetting about what happened, but overcoming it, I think is definitely really good. And the relationship that the character Edie forms with the Hunter as well, it really anchors the entire movie. The Hunter is really someone that she didn't know she needed, but becomes that friend and that support system that she didn't have before. And I really liked the connection that these two ended up forming. There's a really fun scene where there's this song that that Edie has listened to, and the Hunter isn't really familiar with it. And what they did with that, I thought, was a lot of fun. I really appreciated that dynamic throughout the entire movie, and I thought it really worked in that way. And especially where they go in the end, I mean, it was, again, just a really satisfying experience. And I think it's something the film does do really well. What brings the movie down for me, I will say, are a couple things. One, this is a very familiar story. It doesn't really do anything particularly new. It's not really breaking any specific new ground or anything like that. We definitely have seen a lot of things from it before. But I think, again, what really does keep it fresh is Robin Wright's performance and really doing a great job of showing the hardship that she's gone through. But the thing that brings the film down for me the most is that because the film is so short, it's only about 82 minutes, I think, without credits, we really aren't given the time to fully dissect into this tragedy and what Edie really went through. We get an idea of what it was, and especially towards the end, we have a clear we have a clear idea of what has happened to her. We have a clear picture of what she's really gone through. But it doesn't feel like the film dives into it as deep as they really could have. I would have liked to see a bit more flashbacks. I would have liked to see a bit more of Edie really grieving about this, because the first 30 minutes of this film are so tragic. They're so hard to watch. You might want to look away at some points, but it's so masterfully handled, and you really do feel like you get a sense of what she's gone through. And once the hunter enters the picture, the film is still good, but it feels like it loses its way in terms of the tragedy. They needed to focus a bit more on that. They needed a little bit more time, I think, to fully dive into that, and I think that it could have made things just a little bit better overall. Robin Wright as a director, she doesn't really bring anything new in terms of a style here, but I do think the film is still well directed. I think she does what she needs to really make this concept work, and overall, I did enjoy Land. I think it's definitely a very effective film, and again, I think it's a film that a lot of people are going to relate to for sure. I do wish it was just a little bit more, it went a little bit more in depth with this character, but Wright's performance especially really carries this entire film in a nice way, and I think definitely it's a film that a lot of people are going to be impacted by for sure. So I'm going to give Land a B-. So the next one we're talking about is Prisoners of the Ghostland, and this film, I mean, this was easily one of the ones I was most looking forward to, not only because of Nicolas Cage, but also because I've heard so much about the director, Sion Sona. Everyone's talked about just how crazy he is, and how he is truly like a filmmaker that's unparalleled, and how I wasn't ready for just how insane this was going to be, and yeah, this film is absolutely bonkers, and I've seen a lot of people go on about how, oh, this film, feels like it's too, Americanized and things like that, but I didn't really feel that way at all. I thought this film actually did a really good job of combining the really just, wackiness of a Nicolas Cage film combined with a lot of samurai action. I think those two things went hand in hand very nicely. And the other thing I didn't expect for this film is that it's actually a bit more of a slow burn than you'd expect. The plot is very simple, where you have this criminal and his name is literally just Hero. He's going to rescue this governor's daughter, basically because he's been imprisoned for a while, and he's told that if he rescues this man, the governor's daughter, that he will end up being free, and he ends up going there, but then he finds her that she's in this weird, supernatural universe, and there's this weird prophecy that's going on that the character Bernice is in, and it's really weird. It's really out there, but I think it really does work for this film. This film makes absolutely no apologies for just how strange it really is, and that's something that I really did appreciate. And I think acting-wise, everyone is so good in this film. Nicolas Cage does a really good job at playing this guy that throughout the first half of this film really doesn't give a fuck about anything that's going on, but really does transform and gains a lot more empathy and becomes more of a hero, and he does a really great job of that. He does have his regular Nicolas Cage freakouts that you're expecting him to, but he also is a little bit more reserved in this film, and I thought it really worked for his character. I really liked what they ended up doing with him here, because he's the kind of guy that he has very strict rules. He can't alter his costume. He has to be very careful with certain things that he says. He just, the way he goes about this mission, it's really well done, and I thought Cage just did such a great job here. Sofia Boutella also, I thought, does a really great job. She had a lot more to do than I was really expecting, especially when you go into the premise. He finds Bernice pretty early on in this film, and the chemistry between her and Cage, it works very well. And Bernice as a character, they go in some really interesting directions with her. you know, we realize there's a little bit more behind her supposed kidnapping, and I think the film dives into that pretty well, and there's a connection between her and Cage that I really wasn't expecting. There's a bit of a twist there that I don't want to spoil, but I thought it worked really well, and I've heard a lot of people say, oh, there's flat characterizations, we don't know anything about the characters in this film, and I would completely disagree. I think the film does a lot to give you those avenues of who these characters are, and you know, why they really are going in the directions that they are. I think the film does a really good job with that. But also, Bill Moseley as the governor just absolutely goes for it here. He's so over the top, but he relishes every single second of it. This is a guy that is easily one of the most despicable characters of the entire year, but he's the definition, I think, of a love-to-hate kind of villain. I mean, he really sinks his teeth into this role, and every time he's on screen, I just loved every second of what he was doing. I thought he did such a great job as this character. Really, all of the actors here. I mean, Tak Seguchi plays this character Yasujiro, who is absolutely horrifying. He's the governor's right-hand man. He's got this, like, samurai sort of swords that automatically just freaks you out the second that you see it, and he does such a great job here. I mean, all of the acting here, like I said, everyone really does a great job, and like I said, Sion Sona as a director, I was very impressed with what he ended up doing. I mean, this is a film that turned out completely differently than he was initially expecting it to. This was supposed to be filmed in a completely different location, but he ended up having, He ended up contracting, I believe it was cancer or something like that. You know, he ended up having a heart attack, and because of that, Nick Cage decided, why don't we just shoot it in Japan, because it'd be easiest for Sona to do, and I thought it really did work out. Like I said, it really helps the blend of both Eastern and Western culture, and I really appreciate that a lot, and I thought both of those things worked hand in hand here. This film, at points, is absolutely hilarious, and then at points, it is absolutely riveting. And I think those things work very well together. The writing here as well, the film does a really good job of the world building and really setting you up on this mission, giving you an idea of how the Ghostland really works, this crazy timeline that they gotta follow. I mean, this cult, and it is like a cult that Bernice is in, they're so obsessed with the concept of time to the point where they're worried that something bad is going to happen, and it all pretty much is led by this dastardly governor, and seeing how he runs things as well. I think the film just does a really great job at setting everything up, so when we eventually get to the stuff we want to see, it feels that much more earned. And the film absolutely goes all in terms of the action. I mean, this film is so bloody and insane, and I really loved that, especially when it comes to cinematography. There are just some amazing shots throughout this entire film. There's this weird motif with gumballs that I don't want to get into, but I just thought everything about this, I mean, I really appreciate it a lot, and it's really the kind of film that really made me miss the theatrical experience, and I know we're slowly starting to get that back, especially with movie theaters opening up in like New York now and things like that, but I really just feel like this is going to be a film that if you see it with a crowd, you're going to be very lucky, because I feel like this film is enhanced that much more. There's so many scenes that I feel will just absolutely delight audiences, but I also do feel like this is a kind of love it or hate it film, and I've seen it's dividing a lot of people, but I am in the camp that absolutely loved this one. I loved how weird this thing was. I loved how, like I said, it really embraced its cheesiness in that way. It really embraced its weirdness. It's so bizarre, and there really isn't anything quite like it, but it's the perfect amount of samurai action and normal sort of, blockbuster entertainment that I think we really do kind of need right now. The way it dabbled into all that was so good. It's not going to be for everyone, like I said, but I absolutely recommend this one. I think this film, again, it's definitely more of a slow burn than you're expecting, but stick with it, and I think it absolutely delivers, especially the climax, because holy shit, I mean, there are just so many memorable moments and so many things to love about this one. I really adored this film a lot. This is definitely one of my favorite films of the year already, and I am going to give Prisoner of the Ghostland an A-. And the last one with me talking about, at least in this part of the video, because I do technically have a part 2, but it really is just one review, but we'll get into that, in the next video. But the film I'm talking about is one that I really wish I could do a full review for. I really do, but obviously, not enough people have seen it yet, so I'm just gonna do a nor, a quicker review for it. That's a film called Mass, and this film is fucking amazing. I mean, this is the kind of film that we really don't see that often, but it is truly a transcendent experience that I think everyone needs to witness at least once. The premise of this film, it's very simple. We're in a church. We see a bunch of churchgoers. We don't really know what's going on. We see this couple enter. Turns out this is a couple that is meeting up with another couple, and we don't really know what it's about. We slowly realize that this couple lost their son due to a school shooting, and the other couple is basically the parents of the perpetrator that, orchestrated this whole event, and it's basically a time for them to try to make amends, try to understand everything, and finally vent their feelings out. And it is one of the most cathartic and emotionally satisfying pieces of entertainment, of film that I have seen in quite a bit. It's a very hard film to watch, for sure, but what I really love about this film is how it really dives into the pain that all of these characters are going through. It really pulls no punches. It does a really great job at showing every single character's perspective. Some of them are completely tone deaf. Some of them don't care as much about this as they should, and then others are deeply affected by this whole thing. And the film really doesn't try to pick a side here. It tries to show how all of these characters are feeling in this given situation, and that's something I really loved about this film, and I think it's just so masterfully handled in that way. And again, for some people, I can understand why they might not like the approach of this film. Like I said, the entire thing is just one conversation. We don't leave this church throughout the whole movie. It's almost like a play in that sense. But considering the way this film is done, I can't really see another way for them to go about this. I feel like it absolutely enhances the experience, and I think it really does work for this film. And like I said, I think that the thing the film really does a great job with is, yes, obviously it gets into the aftermath of this whole thing, but it also really focuses on the guilt of this event. You get to see how these characters really do put the blame on themselves and how they kind of look back at certain situations, whether it's Ann Dowd's character reflecting upon the way she looked at her son, who she never saw as someone that was capable of this. Obviously, she wants to see the good in him, but at the same time, she knows what he did, and she's looking back on certain events and thinking we should have seen it. I think the film does a really good job of delving into that. Or Jason Isaacs' character really getting into the pain that his son went through and how they've lost their son and what this really has done to them as characters. I mean, the film just does a really great job at diving headfirst into that. Every single one of these actors are at the top of their game here, whether it's Martha Plimpton, Jason Isaacs, Reed Birney, but for me, far and away, the standout of this movie is Ann Dowd. She really ends up running away with the whole thing, and throughout the film, I mean, everyone gets at least one moment, but towards the end of this film, you get that moment that everyone's going to be talking about all year, and if she is not at the very least nominated for Best Supporting Actress, I don't know what's wrong with Hollywood, because this is truly a masterful performance that you really don't see coming. The way the film is handled, you don't see what happens with her character at the end of this film really coming, and you think there's a point where, you've finally gone through all of the emotional labor. But then the film surprises you. Another certain thing happens, and it really affects you in a big way. I cried multiple times throughout this film, and I think a lot of people are going to as well. And like I said, it might be too much for some people who have been in this situation because the film feels so raw in that way. But that's what I really loved about this movie, and that's why I hated something like, say, Run, Hide, Fight, because it didn't even try to show the pain of what this can do to someone. I mean, this is a life-altering event, not just for the students, but also for the parents who have completely different perspectives on their lives. They all have different perspectives on this situation. They all feel differently about this situation. They didn't even know each other, really, though, before this situation, and now it's given them this connection, and this time to really heal. But the thing that really brings all these characters together is that they're all going through this situation. It's all impacted their lives in some way. Whether or not they seem to care much about this, it's impacted them in a huge way, and you really do get to see that throughout this entire film, and I think that's what really just it makes this film as effective as it really is. But the other thing that I really adore about this movie is Fran Kranz as a director. This is the director from who was Bill and Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Roderick Rules, and you would have never expected him to handle something like this, to make something this challenging, to make something this ambitious as his first film is truly remarkable, and it's one of the best directorial debuts that I have seen in such a long time, and I'm pretty confident that in years we will be talking about Kranz as like one of the go-to directors, just in terms of in terms of passion, in terms of fearlessness. I mean, he really is a force to be reckoned with here. He really does demonstrate just how talented he is, and I think he does such a great job with that in this film, and the way he really never tries to overlook or abandon any detail in this movie. Everything connects in some way. Everything has some sort of meaning in this film, and I think it really does work here. There's a great running motif as well that I don't want to spoil, but it's really well done the way the film goes about it. And like I said, just being in this church, the whole movie was a brilliant choice, because you really do feel that you're going through it with these characters. You really do feel like you're going on this journey with them. It's all done in real time, and I think it was just such a brilliant choice to go about it in that way. I honestly can't think of a better way to go about it in this film than Kranz did do it, and I thought he just did such a great job with that. The pacing of this film as well is fucking amazing. This film is almost 2 hours long, and yet I never felt a second of it. Every single conversation, I felt so drawn to the screen, and there was a point in the movie where I thought, okay, maybe we're like 20 minutes in. No, we were already like an hour into the movie, and I couldn't believe just how quick it was going. And I don't mean quick in the sense that it felt rushed. I meant in the sense where I never felt the pacing here, because I was just so invested in everything these characters were going through. And about halfway through this movie, there's a scene with Jason Isaacs that was really getting to me, and I'm like, oh my god, they're really going for this here. They're really showcasing what this can do to someone. And then we get a scene that's even more emotional with Martha Plimpton, and then we get that scene with Ann Dowd that I'm talking about. So the film really never stops in terms of the emotions, but it never feels heavy-handed. It never feels like the film is trying to emotionally manipulate you. It just feels like a natural flow in terms of this discussion. It feels like a natural flow in terms of where things are going for these characters, and I really loved what they ended up doing there. There truly hasn't been anything like this film in a while. It's one of the more emotional things that I've seen in quite a bit as well. Really, this is one of those films where at the end of the day, I mean, it already was gaining a lot of praise, and that's why I wanted to see it as much as I did. I knew that this is one of the films that, like, I had to get into that second screening. There was no question about it. I had to make sure that I watched this film. But even knowing all the praise it's getting, this film blew me away in so many more ways than I was expecting. It's a film that I think everyone's going to be talking about towards the end of the year. It's one that everyone's going to be raving about. I cannot wait for this to get a bigger release. I don't know who's going to end up picking this up. This really feels like a Sony Pictures Classics film. I could definitely see like them potentially acquiring it, and if they do, I think that would be wonderful. But I really do think this is a film that, especially towards the end this year, a lot of people are going to be raving about for sure. It is absolutely my favorite film of the year so far. I think it's legitimately perfect. It's such a great acting showcase for these four actors, but it also is so much more than that. It's the journey of an emotional tragedy and what that really does to someone and how it really takes a toll on them and how they might not be willing to express their emotions until the very last second. It grabs you and it never lets you go, just like it would if this was a real situation. If you have been in this situation before, I feel like this is a film you need to watch, but even if you haven't, this is a film that you need to see as soon as you really can, because it really is a must-see. It's one of the most emotionally taxing films that you'll likely watch in a while, but it's one that I think will affect pretty much anyone that views it. And I think especially in a time where we're not getting as many movies coming out, you know, this is probably one of the most effective things that I've seen in the past few years even. It's truly a work of art that I don't think will ever be replicated. It showcases how great of a director I think Fran Kranz is going to turn out to be. It's got so many amazing performances, especially from Martha Plimpton and Ann Dowd. Those are the two standouts here that you absolutely need to be on the lookout for come Oscar season. It's got such an amazing script, so many memorable scenes here. Just overall, it's everything that I could really want in a film like this. If there's one film you watch at Sundance, you absolutely need to make it this one as soon as possible. I can't recommend this film enough, and I'm absolutely going to give Mass an A+. And with that, guys, that's it. Those are all the films I did see at Sundance. Like I said, my next video is going to be for the sixth one that I watched, but I wanted to do an individual review for it, so look forward to that very soon. I really hope you guys get to check out these films throughout the year. I think all of them, even the ones that I didn't like, all of them are worth checking out at least, once for sure. I think it's really cool that, again, Sundance distributed it to, basically expanded it to basically everyone, and I think that's something that, hopefully continues to be a thing, even after the pandemic. I hope that continues to be a thing, because I love getting to go to these festivals. I've wanted to do it for a while, and just having the opportunity is something that really made me happy for sure. But either way, guys, for this video, hope you guys enjoy it. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.